Welcome to Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation of history's most interesting people. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these fascinating lives. Now, let's meet our guest. For those who may somehow not know who you are, who are you?
I am Dante Alighieri, a poet, philosopher, and a man who deeply loved his city, even when it turned its back on him. Many know me simply as the author of The Divine Comedy, where I took a little journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven.
Awesome. Let's trace it back to the absolute beginning. When and where were you born?
I was born in the beautiful city of Florence, Italy, right around the year 1265.
And what was your given name at birth?
My birth name was actually Durante, which means enduring or steadfast.
Is there a story behind your birth name?
It was a traditional family name, but as I grew and began writing, everyone shortened it to Dante. Looking back at the trials of my life, I suppose Durante was quite prophetic. I certainly had to endure a great deal.
No kidding. What was your hometown like growing up?
Florence was magnificent, but incredibly chaotic. It was a bustling medieval hub of trade, art, and gorgeous architecture, like the baptistry of San Giovanni. But it was also fiercely divided by political rivalries that constantly threatened to boil over into the streets.
Sounds intense. What was your family life like?
We were of minor nobility, though not exceptionally wealthy. Sadly, my mother, Bella, passed away when I was just a young boy, and my father passed before I turned 18. I grew up fast, but I was fortunate to have a family status that allowed me to pursue an education.
I'm sorry to hear about your parents. What kind of kid were you?
I was deeply curious, highly sensitive, and a bit of a dreamer. I was captivated by language and poetry early on, spent hours studying, and fell hopelessly in love with the ideal of beauty.
What were your biggest fears growing up?
Beyond the common medieval fears of plague and continuous warfare, I feared spiritual failure and the loss of moral direction. The thought of losing my way in a dark wood of sin and confusion always weighed heavily on my young mind.
What did you dream of becoming as a child?
I wanted to be a master of words, a great poet who could capture the absolute essence of love, philosophy, and faith in our own spoken language, rather than just traditional Latin.
What were some of your favorite activities in school?
I absolutely loved reading classical Latin literature, practicing grammar, and diving into deep philosophical debates. Exploring the works of ancient masters like Virgil was pure bliss for me.
Speaking of early beginnings, what was your first job?
My early responsibilities were tied to civic duties. I eventually enrolled in the Guild of Apothecaries, which was necessary back then if you wanted to enter Florentine politics and serve the city.
Was there a moment where you realized you were different from everyone else?
It was when I first laid eyes on Beatrice Portinari, when I was 9 years old and she was 8. The sheer intensity of the spiritual love and poetic inspiration that awakened inside me at that moment made me realize my path would be driven by a very different, higher calling.
Wow, talk about a legendary muse. What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
Entering local politics and joining the city government as a prior in 1300. It seemed like a natural step to serve my beloved Florence, but it placed me right in the crosshairs of a massive political coup.
What was your biggest break?
Befriending fellow poets like Guido Cavalcanti and studying under Brunetto Latini. They embraced the sweet new style of poetry with me, which gave me the foundation and confidence to write my grandest works.
What were your biggest struggles before success?
Trying to balance the heavy demands of a political life with my creative passions, all while watching the political stability of my hometown crumble around me.
Did you ever consider quitting?
Never. Writing was my oxygen. Even when I lost my home and everything I owned, the poetry kept my spirit alive. Quitting was out of the question.
Were there any specific daily habits or routines that you feel are essential to your success?
Deep, uninterrupted periods of reading, study, and intense reflection. I structured my thoughts with extreme mathematical precision. You can see that in how I organize my poems into perfect sets of lines and sections.
What job would you have had if fame never happened?
I likely would have remained a quiet philosopher, a teacher, or a clerk in a local guild, living out a peaceful, anonymous life reading books.
What was your life like before fame?
It was a life deeply rooted in Florence, walking the familiar streets, serving in the military at the Battle of Campaldino, and sharing poetry with a small, close-knit circle of friends.
How did relationships change after success?
Political turbulence completely fractured my circle. My political alignments led to my banishment, meaning I had to rely on the hospitality and patronage of various nobles across Italy, which distanced me from many old friends.
Did fame bring happiness?
True fulfillment didn't come from earthly fame, but from the spiritual satisfaction of completing my work and remaining true to my artistic vision despite all adversity.
What was the downside of becoming famous?
It made me a prime target for political enemies. When you speak your mind boldly through literature and politics, powerful people take notice, and not always in a kind way.
What misconceptions did people have about you?
Some people thought I was incredibly stern, proud, or entirely consumed by bitterness because of my writings about judgment and punishment. In reality, I was just a man deeply passionate about justice and the ultimate salvation of the human soul.
What was your darkest moment?
The year 1301, when the political faction opposing me took over Florence while I was away. I was falsely accused of corruption, heavily fined, and permanently exiled under threat of being burned at the stake if I ever returned.
What past regrets did you carry that you spoke about?
I expressed regret for the times I allowed myself to wander from the true path of spiritual righteousness and philosophical clarity, losing my way in worldly distractions.
What's something people misunderstood about your life?
People often think my love for Beatrice was a standard earthly romance. It was actually a profoundly spiritual, courtly admiration. She was a symbol of divine grace that guided my soul toward the heavens.
Tell me about a time when everything went wrong and how did you handle it?
When my exile began, I lost my home, my wealth, and my status overnight. I handled it by picking up my pen. I wandered from city to city, turning my immense grief into the very foundation of the divine comedy.
Did fame and fortune change your life?
Fortune certainly didn't, as I spent my later years living as a guest in exile. But the renown of my poetry allowed me to find safe harbor and intellectual community wherever I traveled.
What personal battles were you fighting privately?
The constant agonizing ache of homesickness. I spent decades longing to return to Florence, fighting the internal battle of choosing forgiveness over bitter resentment.
Who had the biggest influence on your life?
Physically, the ancient poet Virgil, who was my ultimate literary guide. Spiritually and creatively, it will always be Beatrice.
What was life like in your final years?
I found a peaceful asylum in the city of Ravenna under the generous patronage of Guido da Polenta. It was a quieter time, surrounded by family, scholars, and friends who respected my work.
What were you working on in your career before you passed away?
I was putting the absolute finishing touches on the final part of my epic poem, Paradiso. Completing that grand celestial journey was the culmination of my life's work.
When and where and how did you pass away, and how old were you?
I passed away in Ravenna in September of 1321 after contracting malaria while returning from a diplomatic mission to Venice. I was 56 years old.
What's a random fact about you most people have never heard?
I once saved a young child from drowning in the baptismal font at the baptistry of San Giovanni in Florence. I actually had to break a piece of the font to get the little one out.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you?
People in the streets used to whisper that my face was dark and my beard was singed because I had literally walked down into hell and come back up.
What was your most unique habit?
I had an incredible visual memory and an obsession with the number 3. I structured almost everything I wrote around it because I saw it as a divine number.
What was your favorite food?
I always appreciated simple traditional food. A humble piece of bread, perhaps some roasted meat, and a cup of good local wine were all I ever needed.
Did you have a favorite restaurant?
We didn't quite have restaurants in the modern sense, but I fondly remember the lively taverns of Florence and the welcoming banqueting tables of the noble courts during my travels.
What was your favorite book?
The Aeneid by Virgil. I read it so many times I practically knew it by heart. It was my artistic North Star.
Did you have any known rivalries?
Oh, absolutely. My biggest rivalry was with the corrupt politicians of Florence and Pope Boniface VIII, whose political interference I fiercely opposed.
Tell us a story nobody talks about.
There is a charming legend that I once heard a local blacksmith singing my poetic verses completely wrong while working. I was so fiercely protective of my words that I marched right in and started tossing his tools around to show him how it felt to have his hard work ruined.
That's hilarious. What was your funniest behind-the-scenes moment?
When my son Pietro told people that I had hidden the final 13 chapters of the Divine Comedy in a secret wall panel, they thought the ending was lost forever until they found them right where a dream had guided them.
Did you ever prank someone?
I wasn't much of a practical joker, but I did pull a few intellectual pranks by hiding clever insults and witty descriptions of my political enemies inside the circles of my fictional underworld for everyone to read.
What was the most outlandish purchase you made?
I rarely had the means for anything outlandish, but whenever I could, I spent my extra coin on rare, beautiful manuscript copies of philosophical and classical texts.
What advice would you give people chasing success?
Follow your own path. Stand firm like a tower that does not shake its top because the wind blows. And use your unique talents to speak truth, no matter the cost.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories they shared that you would like to share with the listeners before signing off?
I would just say that no matter how dark the woods of your own life may seem, there is always a path that leads back to the light. Keep moving forward. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Calvin. It was a true pleasure.
Wow, what an incredible journey through history. Dante shared some amazing insights about his life in Florence, his political struggles, and the profound inspiration behind his timeless poetry. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.